At my daughter's 8th birthday party, she looked up at me and said, "I think I had too much medicine candy." I laughed. "What medicine candy, baby?" I noticed her hand trembling as she held onto the table. Beside me, my husband Theodore and my mother-in-law exchanged looks. "The one from Grandma's locked box," my daughter Zara responded. "Sweetie, Grandma doesn't give you medicine. Maybe you're thinking of regular candy?" "No, Mommy, the special white pills that make me pretty." Mackenzie started backing toward her purse. "I think we should open presents." "What pills, Mackenzie?" I said, standing slowly. "They're just vitamins for her immune system." "Then why hide them from me?" My voice was deadly calm. Why tell an 8-year-old to keep secrets from her mother? My blood turned to ice as everything started to make more sense. Her mysterious illness, the random liver failure, how the doctors could never figure out what was going on. "Are you giving my daughter medication without my knowledge?" Mackenzie fumbled with her purse. "They're perfectly safe." I snatched it from her, dumping the contents. Receipts scattered across the floor. International pharmacy websites. And there, wrapped in a silk scarf, a bottle of pills. Glutathione skin whitening supplements, 5,000 milligrams. I read the label with shaking hands. Maximum adult dose 500 milligrams. I saw Mackenzie's phone had fallen out too. The screen was still on, showing a photo album. I picked it up and nearly vomited. Progress pictures of Zara. Weekly photos showing her skin getting lighter. Annotations like, "Week 1, finally seeing results." And, "Month 6, almost there." I looked at my daughter's beautiful brown skin, at the dark circles under her eyes, at how thin she'd gotten. Her liver failing, her skin whitening, everything that seemed like it had no source. "It was always you." Mackenzie protested. "It's just to help her." "Help her what?" I screamed. "Help her be white. She's 8 years old. She almost died," I said, my voice breaking. 3 times. Do you understand that? 3 times I held her hand while machines kept her alive. Theodore finally spoke. "Mom was just trying to—" "You knew?" I whirled on him. The guilt on his face confirmed everything. "You knew she was poisoning our baby?" "It's not like that," he said weakly. "They're supplements, not poison." "She had a seizure in my arms," I said. "In the grocery store. People thought she was dying. I thought she was dying. I quit my job," I continued, tears streaming. "Senior marketing manager at my dream job. 15 years building my career, gone, because someone had to be with her full time." I laughed bitterly. "Our son doesn't even know me anymore," I said. "Elijah drew a family picture at school last week. Want to know who wasn't in it? Me." I looked at Mackenzie. "While you charged $400 a month to your credit card for pills from Thailand." The memory hit me like a slap. "Oh my gosh, the CPS calls." Theodore went rigid. "That was because of you." I remembered the whispers at pickup. Zara's breathing had become shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Every black mother at school, they'd stop talking when I walked up. "Look what she's doing to that beautiful child," they'd say. Mackenzie's face was stone. "I didn't know about—" "You stood right there." Zara started crying. Her words came out slurred. "I'm sorry, Mommy. Grandma said if I'm pretty, Daddy won't leave us for Ashley." The room went silent. "What did you just say, baby?" "Grandma promised," she sobbed. "She said when I'm white enough, Daddy will love me and won't leave like he wants to." I turned to Theodore. "Who's Ashley?" His face went gray. "She's nobody. The one from your LinkedIn? Regional manager at your company?" My voice was rising. "The one you had coffee with last month for networking?" Theodore's phone buzzed on the counter. He lunged for it, but I was faster. "Text from my MIL sent just now. Don't let her stop treatment now. Dr. Kim says we're close." I shot up. "Who the hell is Dr. A. Kim?" "She's a dermatologist," Mackenzie said quickly. Behind her, Zara's legs buckled slightly. "Madison's mom from Zara's class." I scrolled up through the messages. "Increased dose. She's responding well. Skin is definitely lighter." I took a deep breath. "You're coordinating this? Both of you?" Suddenly Zara's eyes rolled to the back of her head. She collapsed, her tiny body convulsing on the floor. "Zara!" I screamed, dropping to my knees. She was seizing violently, foam tinged with blood coming from her mouth. "Stay with Mommy, sweetheart. I've got you." The door burst open. Our son Elijah stood there in his pajamas. "Is Zara dying again?" His voice was flat, emotionless. My 7-year-old son had seen this so many times it didn't even scare him anymore. "Call 911. I screamed at Theodore, who stood frozen. "Call them now." I turned Zara on her side, timing the seizure. The blood was getting darker. "I'm calling the police." I reached for my phone, but Mackenzie grabbed my wrist. "No, you can't. Look at her skin. It's working. She's so much lighter than before." I wrenched away, but Theodore caught me from behind, his arms tight around me. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, but we're doing what's best for her, for our family." With strength I didn't know I had, I broke free and lunged for my phone, but Mackenzie got there first. She snatched it and dialed 911 herself. "Hello? Yes, my granddaughter is having a seizure. Her mother has been giving her skin whitening pills." My blood ran cold. "She's been bleaching her own baby. I just found the pills. Please hurry." Theodore stared at his mother in shock. The front door crashed open and Rita Simmons rushed in with her medical bag, her partner right behind carrying an oxygen tank. Harvey Guthrie followed them, his hand on his radio while his eyes swept the room taking in everything. Mackenzie immediately started pointing at me and talking loud and fast about how she just found out I'd been giving Zara dangerous pills from the internet. I grabbed the glutathione bottle from where it had fallen and tried to show it to Harvey, but Mackenzie kept stepping between us and talking over me. Rita dropped to her knees beside Zara and her hands moved fast, checking my daughter's pulse at her neck. The seizure had stopped, but Zara wasn't moving and her chest barely rose and fell with each breath. Her lips had this blue color that made my stomach drop because I'd seen it before during her worst episodes. Rita's partner knelt down and started setting up the oxygen mask, while Rita pulled out a small flashlight and checked Zara's pupils. I pushed past Mackenzie and shoved the bottle at Harvey, explaining these were what was poisoning my daughter. I told him my mother-in-law had been secretly giving them to her for months, that they were skin-whitening pills at 10 times the safe dose. Harvey took the bottle and turned it over in his hands, then pulled out his notebook and started writing. His eyes kept moving between me and Mackenzie, who was still insisting I was the one who bought them online. Theodore suddenly came alive and started yelling at his mother, asking her why she lied to the emergency operator. His face was red and his hands were shaking as he demanded to know what she was thinking. Mackenzie's whole face changed and went cold like I'd never seen before. She said she was protecting her granddaughter from an abusive mother who would rather see her child sick than beautiful. The way she said it so calm and planned made me realize this wasn't panic. She'd been thinking about this accusation accusation for a while. Rita looked up from Zara and announced we needed to transport immediately because her oxygen levels were too low. She asked who was riding in the ambulance with the patient. I started moving toward my daughter, but Harvey stepped right in front of me and held up his hand. He said given the conflicting accusations, both Mackenzie and I needed to stay here to give statements. He said Theodore could go with the child since he had parental rights too, and they needed to sort out the facts first. I screamed that my baby needed me and started trying to push past him, but he stayed firm. I told him I had evidence on Mackenzie's phone that proved she did this, that I had screenshots of everything. Harvey looked torn for a second, but said they had procedures to follow, and Theodore was the child's father. Rita and her partner had already gotten Zara onto their stretcher and were wheeling her toward the door. I watched my unconscious daughter disappear out the door with my husband, who knew about the poisoning, walking beside her. My chest felt like it was crushed and I couldn't breathe right. That's when Elijah appeared at the top of the stairs with his backpack already on his shoulders. He said he was going to stay at his friend's house like he always did when Zara got sick. The way he said it, so matter of fact, like this was just another Tuesday, made something crack inside me. I told him to wait because I needed him here, that this time was different. He just shrugged and sat on the stairs like he'd been through this routine too many times to care. Harvey told us he was separating Mackenzie and me into different rooms while we waited for another officer. He put Mackenzie in the kitchen and me in the dining room where I could still see the spot where Zara had been seizing. I pulled out my phone and started working fast, forwarding myself every screenshot I'd taken from Mackenzie's phone earlier. The progress photos showing Zara getting lighter week by week made me sick all over again. The texts with Dr. Kim about increasing doses and being close to their goal. The pharmacy receipts showing hundreds of dollars spent every month on pills from Thailand. I made sure everything was saved in multiple places because I knew Mackenzie would try to delete it all. Through the wall, I could hear Mackenzie on the phone with someone, probably her lawyer, talking about false accusations and parental alienation. I wonder what's really driving Mackenzie to keep insisting the mother did this when Theodore just saw her with the pills. There's something odd about how quickly she flipped that story to the 911 operator, like she had that excuse ready to go. About 20 minutes later, another officer arrived, a woman who introduced herself, but I was too upset to catch her name. She sat across from me at the dining table and asked me to start from the beginning. I walked her through everything: how Zara had been mysteriously sick for almost 2 years with liver problems no doctor could explain, how she'd had 3 near-death experiences that required hospitalization, and how I'd quit my job to care for her. I showed her my phone with all the evidence I'd gathered, the photos, the texts, everything. She wrote it all down and asked detailed questions about dates and times and which doctors we'd seen. I told her about finding the pills just now, about the 5,000 milligram dose when the maximum safe amount for an adult was 500 milligrams. I showed her the text Mackenzie had sent Theodore about Dr. Kim saying they were close to their goal. The officer's face got more serious with each piece of evidence I showed her. Harvey came back into the room after about an hour and said they needed to go to the hospital to check on the child's condition. He said they'd determine if charges were warranted based on what the doctors found and the evidence collected. He told me neither Mackenzie nor I could leave town and that he was particularly interested in talking to this Dr. Kim person. He said someone would be in touch within 24 hours about next steps and that I should get a lawyer immediately. The second Harvey's car pulled away, I ran back inside and grabbed Elijah, who was still standing on the stairs. I told him we were going to the hospital right now and he just nodded and went to get his tablet. My hands shook as I buckled him into the back seat and started driving way too fast toward the hospital. I called my sister on speaker and she picked up on the second ring. When I told her about the glutathione pills at 5,000 milligrams, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she started explaining how glutathione overdose destroys a child's liver cells and causes something called oxidative stress. She said at that dose, Zara's liver was basically being poisoned every single day. She told me the damage might be permanent and I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. Elijah asked from the back seat if Zara was going to need a new liver, and I couldn't even answer him. We got to the hospital and I practically dragged Elijah through the emergency room doors. Theodore was sitting in the waiting room with his head in his hands looking completely destroyed. When he saw us, he stood up and started walking toward me, but I held up my hand to stop him. He told me they'd taken Zara straight to dialysis because her kidneys were shutting down from the toxins. He tried to say he was sorry, but I cut him off and told him to save it for court. I told him we were done pretending to be a family after what he let happen to our baby. His face crumpled and he started crying, but I felt nothing but cold anger. About an hour later, Dr. Savannah Maloney came out in her scrubs looking serious. She sat us down and explained that Zara was stable but critical with clear signs of chronic glutathione poisoning. Her liver enzymes were through the roof and her kidney function was at 30%. She said they'd already notified CPS as mandatory reporters since this was obvious child endangerment. She told us both parents would need to be interviewed and cooperated fully with the investigation. Theodore asked if Zara would be okay, and Savannah said it was too early to tell. She said the next 48 hours would be critical, and they were doing everything they could. A man in a rumpled suit showed up about an hour later and introduced himself as Albert Stein from CPS. He looked tired and had coffee stains on his tie like he'd been up all night. He asked to speak with me first, and we went to a small conference room off the main waiting area. I showed him everything on my phone, including the screenshots of Mackenzie's progress photos of Zara getting lighter. I showed him the text between Mackenzie and Theodore about Dr. Kim and increasing the dose. I showed him the receipt photos from the international pharmacy websites charging $400 a month. Albert wrote everything down in a small notebook and asked detailed questions about dates and times. He wanted to know when Zara first got sick and how many times she'd been hospitalized. He asked if I'd ever suspected anything, and I had to admit I hadn't until today. While Albert went to interview Theodore, I called my best friend who works as a paralegal. She answered even though it was late and immediately gave me 3 names of family lawyers. She told me to document everything, including taking photos of Zara's condition and medical charts. She said to start a timeline of events while my memory was fresh because I'd need it for court. I started typing notes on my phone about everything that had happened in the last 2 years. About 2 hours later, I heard shouting from the lobby and ran out to see what was happening. Mackenzie was there with a man in an expensive suit trying to push past the security guard. She was screaming that I was keeping her from her granddaughter and that she had rights. The security guard was blocking her and saying she couldn't enter based on the ongoing investigation. She saw me and started yelling that I was alienating her from Zara and poisoning everyone against her. Her lawyer was trying to calm her down, but she kept screaming about how she was trying to help. I went back to Zara's room and found Nina Kavanaugh waiting for me. She introduced herself as the hospital social worker and pulled me aside to talk. She explained that Zara would need to stay for at least a week for treatment and monitoring. She said with the conflicting accusations from both Mackenzie and me, CPS might place Zara in temporary foster care. She said they had to determine who the safe parent was, and that could take time. I felt my whole body go cold and told her I had evidence proving Mackenzie did this. Nina said she understood, but the process had to play out, and I should get a lawyer immediately. I stepped into the hallway and called Evie Harding, whose name my friend had given me. She answered her cell even though it was almost midnight and agreed to meet me at the hospital immediately. She told me to gather every piece of evidence I had, including medical records and texts. She said we'd probably have an emergency custody hearing within 48 hours, and I needed to be ready. That night, I slept in the chair beside Zara's bed holding her small hand. The machines beeped steadily, and I watched her oxygen levels like they might drop if I looked away. Around 3 in the morning, she woke up confused and asked where she was. When she asked for her daddy, I told her he wasn't here right now. She said good because she didn't want him to see her ugly with her dark skin coming back. My heart broke completely hearing my 8-year-old say those words. The next morning, Detective Lucas Byron showed up with a badge and a serious expression. He was thorough and asked me to go through everything again from the beginning. He took the pill bottle for testing and said he was getting a warrant for Mackenzie's financial records. He wanted to trace every purchase from the international pharmacies and build a timeline of the poisoning. He said this was now a criminal investigation, and both Mackenzie and Theodore could face serious charges. Lucas told me he'd be bringing in Dr. Kim for questioning that afternoon, and I should stay close to my phone. 2 hours later, he called from the station saying she'd shown up with her lawyer acting all confused and innocent. She kept insisting she only gave friendly advice about vitamins and had no idea what Mackenzie was actually doing. Lucas said her whole act fell apart when he pulled out Mackenzie's phone and showed her their text messages right there on the screen. The one where she wrote about increasing the dose made her go pale. Then the one where she mentioned the specific brand from Thailand made her lawyer start whispering in her ear real fast. She finally admitted she'd been advising Mackenzie about skin brightening, but claimed she thought it was just topical creams, not pills. Lucas told her to expect criminal charges and that the medical board would be getting a full report by tomorrow. The next morning, Theodore showed up at the hospital trying to see Zara, but the security guard stopped him at the elevator. I'd had Evie file an emergency protection order the night before, and they were ready for him. The process server was actually waiting in the lobby and handed him the papers right there in front of everyone. Theodore started crying and begging the guard to just let him see his daughter for 5 minutes. The guard called me in Zara's room and I told him absolutely not, that Theodore was dangerous to our children. I could hear Theodore sobbing through the phone, but I felt nothing except cold determination to keep my kids safe from him and his mother. Later that day, Albert from CPS showed up with his supervisor, a woman who looked like she'd been doing this job way too long. They needed to interview Elijah, and I had to bring him to the hospital from my friend's house where he'd been staying. Elijah sat in the family conference room swinging his legs and told them everything in his flat little voice. He talked about how Grandma always gave Zara special medicine when Mommy wasn't home. He said she made Zara promise not to tell and gave her extra toys when she took the pills without complaining. Then he mentioned that Daddy knew because he saw him watching once, and Daddy just said they were vitamins to help Zara feel better. The supervisor wrote everything down while Albert asked gentle follow-up questions about how often this happened. Elijah said it was every time Grandma babysat, which was usually twice a week when I was at work. After the interview, the CPS supervisor pulled me aside and explained they needed to implement a safety plan immediately. Oh wow, the way Elijah remembers every detail about the medicine giving is really interesting. How does a kid his age notice and remember all those specific things about Grandma's behavior? She said Zara would stay in my custody, but Theodore would only get supervised visits at a county facility if he wanted them. Mackenzie was completely banned from any contact with either child pending the criminal investigation. She said it wasn't perfect, but it was better than removing the children to foster care while they sorted everything out. I agreed to all their terms and signed the paperwork right there, my hand shaking as I wrote my name. Evie met me at the hospital that afternoon with a stack of legal documents an inch thick. She'd filed for emergency temporary custody and gotten us a hearing date for the next morning at 9. She said with all the evidence we had, especially the CPS safety plan and the criminal investigation, we should get temporary full custody no problem. But she warned me Theodore would probably hire someone good and fight back hard. She was right because that evening I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ashley saying she was sorry about everything that was happening and wanted me to know Theodore had been staying at her apartment since the night Zara went to the hospital. I screenshotted immediately and forwarded it to Evie, who texted back that this was perfect evidence of abandonment for our custody case. She told me to save everything and not respond to Ashley at all. The emergency custody hearing the next morning was brutal, but thankfully quick. The judge was an older woman who looked disgusted as she read through the medical evidence about Zara's poisoning. She reviewed the CPS report, and Albert's supervisor testified about the safety concerns with both Theodore and Mackenzie. The judge asked Theodore's lawyer a few sharp questions about why his client hadn't protected his daughter from obvious abuse. Within an hour, she granted me temporary full custody with Theodore getting supervised visits only at the county facility. She also issued a restraining order against Mackenzie requiring her to stay at least 500 feet away from both children at all times. Theodore tried to say something to the judge, but his lawyer grabbed his arm and made him sit back down. After court, Theodore followed me to the parking lot even though Evie told me to walk fast and not engage. He cornered me by my car, crying and begging me to understand that he never meant for things to go this far. He said he thought the pills were harmless, and his mom said they were just like vitamins that lots of people used. I looked him straight in the eye and told him he watched our daughter almost die 3 times and did nothing to stop it. I said that was all the understanding he'd ever get from me, and if he didn't move away from my car, I'd call the police. He backed up with his hands raised and I drove away, watching him stand there in the parking lot getting smaller in my mirror. Back at the hospital that afternoon, Dr. Ed Maloney had good news for the first time in what felt like forever.